Hey guys, welcome to your YouTube homework review. The secret word is Megaminx, which is the name of this giant cube. And the secret words this week are all different types of cubes in honor of a grade that's becoming more and more obsessed with cubing. Quickly, here are the answers for A through D. Here are these answers. On the back, you should have figured out that Samantha's total pay is $2,000 this month, and that after 3 years, Malik's final investment is worth $560. Alright, any of that was tricky, you should definitely stick around. Alright, so last week we started learning about decimal division and our homeworks, and tomorrow you're going to have a homework quiz on these types of questions. And when we see a division problem with decimals, there's a lot of ways we can solve it. One way we learned about these past 2 weeks was you can think of any division problem as a ratio, and then you can just multiply by something to get an equivalent ratio. Like, for example, you could decide to multiply this ratio by 10 to get a new ratio of 60 to 5. And that's basically like saying this division problem is equal to 60 divided by 5. And 60 divided by 5 is 12. So by making the division problem into an easier one, we were able to find the answer. Now, if you really dislike decimals when you're dividing, you could do something that I noticed Brianna doing a lot on her homework. She would just take this problem, I think Eric was too, and rewrite it so that the decimal was a fraction. So she would think of this as 6 divided by 5/10 as a fraction, which is the same as 1/2. And then you can basically do multiply by the inverse to figure this one out. So you could think of 6 as 6 over 1, and then multiply by the inverse of 1/2, which is just 2, or 2 over 1, and that would equal 12 over 1, which is the same as 12. And there are many other ways to do this, but I think those were the two most common ways I was noticing. Alright, so for B, again, we have decimal division. I'm going to use the strategy where I try and multiply so that the divisor turns into 1. So I know that 4/4 is a whole, so I'm going to multiply by 4. So that's going to be like $1, so I'm just going to put 1 whole. And then -5 times 4 is going to be -20, because different signs give you a negative when you're multiplying. And then we're just dividing it by 1, so that's just going to equal -20. If you wanted to use Brianna's way and change the decimal into a fraction, you could have rewritten the problem like this: -5 divided by 1/4. And then you could just multiply by the inverse of 1/4. And again, you'd end up getting -20 over 1, which is just the same as -20. For part C, again, we're dividing by a decimal. And we could do a lot here. I think I'm going to multiply and make this a simpler problem by multiplying by 2. And I'm doing that because I know 1.5 times 2 is just going to give me a whole number of 3, or 3.0. And then 2 times 45 is 90, so I'm going to get 90 divided by 3, and 90 divided by 3 is 30. But you could have also said, alright, I'm going to rewrite this as a fraction and thought of it as 1.5, and 1.5 is the same as 3/2, and then you could have done multiply by the inverse, and you'd end up getting the same answer. D is kind of a scary looking one, but we can use this strategy of thinking of division as a ratio to do it as well. And multiplying by 10 is a good way to kind of move the decimal out of there. So -7.2 times 10 is going to move the 7 and the 2 over one place value, which is going to give us -72. and then negative 6/10 times 10 is going to turn into negative 6. 72 divided by 6 is 12, and since the signs are the same when we're multiplying or dividing, it's going to turn into a positive. Alright, so jumping back to Unit 2, where we were learning about the constant of proportionality. We see a table, and it's Jose keeping track of how many gallons of gas are used when maybe his family goes on a trip to Florida. And then it's part A says find the constant of proportionality. Remember that in a proportional relationship, there's always one number called the constant of proportionality that you can multiply one value by to get the other value. And to find it, you can always do long division. So if we know that Jose's family travels 100 miles on 8 gallons, what you can do is you can do 100 divided by 8 to figure out what we're multiplying the gallons by. So 8 goes into 10 once. And bring down the next place value. 8 goes into 20 twice, which is 16. And then adding a decimal point and a 0, I can keep on going. 8 goes into 45 times, and that's going to get rid of our remainder. So it looks like the constant of proportionality is 12.5. But let's actually remind ourselves what that means. So obviously that means we can multiply the gallons by 12.5, and that's going to give us the miles each time. But it also means this. Imagine that in this table, I kind of just wrote it like this, and we had 8 gallons and 100 miles. When we divide by 8, what we're doing is we're finding the miles per 1 gallon, which is also the unit rate. And it's just a good thing to remember that the constant of proportionality is also and always the unit rate. So this is the amount of miles per gallon. Alright, and then part B says write an equation. So I know that in the table I can always take the number of gallons and multiply it by 12.5, and it's going to equal the miles. And then when I get down to part C, there's a lot of ways to do it. It says how far can Jose's family drive on 20 gallons? So what I could do is I could just substitute 20 in for G and multiply it by 12.5. And if you end up doing that, you should end up getting 250 miles. Alright, so on the back, we start off by reviewing commission. And commission was one of the topics you guys learned on your vacation packet. So it says Samantha works at the Gap and earns a salary of $1,500 a month plus a commission on all sales. This month, she helped sell $25,000 worth of clothing. Okay, so we know a couple of things. We know her salary is $1,500, and that's the amount she gets no matter what. But then it says that her commission is 2% of or on all sales, and it tells us that she helped sell $25,000 worth of clothing. So remember that if you're working at a store and you help sell their clothes, you're not going to get to keep a lot of that money. But if you earn commission, you get to keep normally a really small percent of it. So she's going to get to keep 2% of $25,000. She also gets that salary of $1,500, and if we add that together, we're going to get her total pay this month. Alright, so let's find 2%. So we have $25,000, and that would be all of it. She's not going to get to keep all of it. If you divide by 100, that's like getting rid of 2 zeros, which would be $250, and that's 1%. And then just double that and you'd get $500 as 2%. So she's going to get this much salary no matter what, and $500 on commission. And if you add those two together, you should end up getting $2,000. The last problem goes over investments and interests. Remember that, alright, so it says Malik, his initial investment was $500, so he takes that and he puts it into a bank. Then the bank's going to give him 4% interest each year, and Malik keeps his money in the bank for 3 years. So basically, he's always going to have that $500, but each year he's going to get 4% more of it. And he keeps it in for 3 years. So let's start by finding 4%. So the whole amount of money he puts in the bank is 500. That's 100%. If we want to find 1%, that's like dividing by 100. Which would be $5. And then if we scale that up by times 4, we can see that 4% would be $20. A common mistake here would be to just do 500 plus 20 and say that's how much his investment is worth, but we have to deal with this 3 years. So we're going to take the $20 of interest and multiply it by 3 to get 60. And then, going back to the question, it says how much is his total investment worth after 3 years? Well, he started with $500, and he got $60 more from interest. So now, his investment is worth $560. Guys, thanks for watching and being careful by checking all of your work, and I will see you later.